It really gives me great pleasure to introduce our final keynote speaker today, Professor Asma Afsaruddin. She's a professor of religious and Arabic and Islamic studies at the University of Indiana. She's also the chairwoman of the board of CSID for the last 10 years, I think, or something like that. CSID has been around for 26 years. It's hard to believe, but since 1999, so it's been a long time. But Asma has been extremely helpful and supportive in keeping CSID going, and inshallah we'll work together to make it even better. We have done our best, but we are also a team, and the support of the board is very important. And we have been through ups and downs, but we have always stuck together and worked together. So Asma will deliver, Professor Afsaruddin will deliver the final keynote remarks for this conference, and I hope they will be a little bit optimistic. I hope it's good to be optimistic and not to lose hope, because things can change very quickly. When Ben Ali fell in Tunisia, when the Arab Spring started in Tunisia, I was in Tunisia at the time. Nobody expected it. It was completely unexpected, just happened all of a sudden. On that day, I was there, and people were still supporting Ben Ali, until the end, and France was supporting Ben Ali and all that. Things can change very quickly, so let's not lose hope, and let's keep going and do the best we can. Professor Asma?
Thank you, Adwan, for this kind introduction. It has been a privilege being associated with CSID under the gifted leadership of Radwan Masmoudi. As you can see from today's proceedings, that this is the kind of conversation we've fostered over the years. What results we've actually been able to achieve, only time can tell. But needless to say, we have to continue to make that effort. So good afternoon, everyone, again, and thank you for sticking with us till the very bitter end. And I hope you will agree with me that this day has been full of deep insights and lively discussions of some of the most critical issues in the current period concerning democracy and the spread of authoritarianism, and how to tackle some of these issues. As we learned today, these are all timely topics, since good governance appears to be an elusive concept these days, not just in the Arab and Muslim majority world, but in large swaths of the planet today. And I think this was a point that was made forcefully, maybe by Dali, I forget who it was, but this is a point that we need to make over and over again. For the last several years at our annual conferences, we have been sounding the alarm that democracy, both as a concept and a process, is facing an existential threat. In so much as its desirability itself and its necessity are being increasingly questioned, even in well-entrenched democracies like the United States. All the warning signs that remind us that we must be ever vigilant against the forces of tyranny are present here and elsewhere. As Timothy Snyder, author of the widely acclaimed book titled On Tyranny, that was published in 2017, some of you may be familiar with that work, remarked, and I'm quoting now from the book, "We might be tempted to think that our democratic heritage, as Americans that is, automatically protects us from such threats, that is, the threats posed by tyranny. This is a misguided reflex," he continues. "In fact, the precedent set by the founders demands that we examine history to understand the deep sources of tyranny and to consider the proper responses to it. Americans today are no wiser than Europeans who saw democracy yield to fascism, Nazism, or communism in the 20th century." End of quote. Many of you, like myself, may be feeling demoralized, and I get from the tenor of this conference today that some of you are actually sharing my feelings of demoralization. by the current political atmosphere. And why not? In the US, this has led to an unprecedented attrition in our civil rights and in the rule of law. For those of us who are in academia, we have watched in dismay the increasing assault on academic freedom on our university campuses and the arbitrary restrictions placed on freedom of speech, especially in regards to what can be said and what cannot be said in our classrooms about U.S. foreign policy measures, particularly in regard to the Middle East. At some universities, including at my institution, students are being encouraged to snitch on their professors if they find their lectures unpalatable for political reasons and lodge formal complaints against them, to which the professors are then forced to prepare detailed refutations, as if we have nothing better to do with our time. Many university administrators, including at my institution, have adopted draconian and harshly punitive measures to crack down on student protesters against the war in Gaza, as well as on select faculty for inviting certain speakers. International students have been particularly targeted at many campuses, as we know, some of whom have faced deportation proceedings and have been abducted outside their homes and placed in detention for publicly criticizing specific U.S. foreign policies. It is perhaps telling that Professor Tim Snyder, whom I just referred to, has left Yale University, where he taught until recently for the University of Toronto. And one may surmise that his departure was prompted at least in partial response to the curtailment of academic freedoms and the erosion of our First Amendment rights that we once took for granted in the U.S. You cannot have a flourishing democracy in which all residents within a nation state do not enjoy the legal protections offered by due process and the rule of law that should apply equally to citizens and non-citizens alike. As a constant backdrop to the events unfolding in the U.S. is, of course, the war in Gaza that continues to unleash a cycle of violence unprecedented in recent history that has resulted in unbearable human suffering among Palestinian civilians and threatens to destabilize the entire MENA region. Only time will tell what the long-term implications of this humanitarian calamity will be for democracy in the region. Although now there, Hashim actually gave us, I thought, a very insightful preview of what is at stake. The immediate consequences are heartbreaking. There's chaos and devastation for the indigenous Gazan population, who is now facing mass starvation and the continuous degradation of their lives and their intrinsic dignity as human beings, as much of the world looks on in complicit silence. There can be no denying that the dystopian Orwellian future some had predicted back in the 20th century is increasingly encroaching upon us and is no longer just a figment of the literary imagination. I'm assuming that you're attending this conference today because you are interested in promoting and strengthening democracy rather than undermining it. And you're also very likely interested in thinking about concrete strategies as to how to go about doing just that. And again, throughout the day, of course, we've heard and listened to very insightful comments on how to react to this unfolding calamity before us, for which we are mostly unprepared. So we've heard very intelligent analyses of many of the complex factors that are contributing to our contemporary dystopian landscape, and listened to informed discussions of possible solutions to these escalating problems. I would suggest that there's nothing more important today than to band together and push back at these alarming trends that threaten to erode the international order and the rule of law. I would like to suggest that we craft effective responses and strategies in 3 critical ways. There's a little bit of optimism that I've tried to inject into it, so we'll see if you pick up on that. First, we tend to forget that religious values can indeed be harnessed in defense of democratic values. and to promote a culture of representative government and political accountability on the part of those who rule. Certainly, those of us who work in the area of Islamic political thought continue to make the case that there are important scriptural and intellectual resources within the diverse Islamic tradition that can be drawn upon in order to craft robust arguments for the promotion of democratic forms of governance in the MENA region and in the broader Muslim majority world. And we heard a number of compelling arguments in favor of this position today, and I will not rehash them here. But our own Nader Hashmi is still in the room in his important book titled Islam, Secularism, and Liberal Democracy, Toward Democratic Theory for Muslim Societies, concludes, and I'm now quoting from your book, that the struggle for liberal democracy, both in the West historically and in the Muslim world today, cannot be disconnected from debates about the normative status of religion in government. Second, I want to emphasize that one of the most important positive values to be derived from Islamic religious, ethical, and political thought is that of justice. And we've already heard this mentioned multiple times in the course of the day, but it is worth repeating. Justice has to be a cornerstone of democratic societies. A functioning democratic state cannot be unjust and discriminatory towards selected groups living within its boundaries, just because they look different or they worship differently, etc. Since Muslim populations are increasingly the victims of social and political injustices in many countries, this is a principle that should be of fundamental importance to us. We need to draw from our own Islamic tradition to resist the indignities that are being inflicted upon us, and that is increasingly leading to the abrogation of our human rights in both majority and minority contexts. And we must do so in ethical and principled ways. The means to achieve noble ends are just as important as the ends themselves. This may sound trite, but is extremely important to keep in mind, particularly in the contemporary world. Resorting to violence and vengeful actions cannot be the answer. One of the most relevant verses in this context found in the Quran is derived from chapter 5, verse 8, which counsels, quote, "Let not the rancor or hatred of a people toward you cause you to incline to wrongdoing and depart from justice. Be just, this is closer to piety." In addition to being highly relevant in our contemporary world, racked by divisiveness and mistrust of one another, it is also one of the most difficult verses to act upon, suggesting as it does that we overcome our instinctual human response to retaliate in kind against those who inflict justice and violence on us. But the Quran shows us a more humane and morally superior way forward to address such gross injustices without succumbing to a deadly, unending spiral of reflexive, retaliatory violence that is ultimately self-defeating. The rich commentary literature known as tafsir reveals a consensus among pre-modern and modern Quran exegetes on the general meaning and relevance of Quran 5:8 for constructing a distinctive mode of Islamic piety that deliberately forsakes the revenge-based tribal code of military practices that were current among the pre-Islamic Arabs. Such violent tribalism is unfortunately triumphantly resurgent in the contemporary period, as we can very easily see. The famous late 9th century Quran commentator At-Tabari remarks that this verse, in general, exhorts Muslims to be upright and just in their character and conduct toward all, regardless of whether they're allies or enemies, and thereby not transgress the divinely delineated boundaries of righteous behavior. Should Muslims reciprocate the hatred of their enemies and act unjustly, then they would be guilty of stooping to their level and violating the commandments of God. In the late 12th century, another famous Quran exegete, Fakhruddin al-Razi, similarly stress that the verse cautions Muslims against capitulating to irrational anger and hatred and commands them to observe the requirements of temperate behavior, even as he says when the enemy behaves badly with you. Ar-Razi stresses, now I'm quoting from his tafsir work, when the enemy behaves with barbaric ferocity against you, one must still continue to act justly and observe the bounds of civilized conduct. Regardless of the wrongful curtailment of their religious rights and other acts of injustice directed at Muslims by the pagan Meccans in the 7th century, Ar-Razi underscores the fact that the Quran required Muslims to act in accordance with the dictates of justice and equality, ala sabil al-adl wal-insaf, and thus forsake, and quoting now again from Ar-Razi, partisan sentiment, oppression, and tyranny, even in the face of extreme provocation. This is a broad injunction, khitab am, binding on Muslims in perpetuity, states Ar-Razi. And finally, I want to point out that in an increasingly globalizing world, the Islamic tradition can provide helpful moral paradigms and historical precedents that help establish the case for embracing pluralism in its broadest sense, of being receptive to diversity and being inclusive of everyone whom we reside with. The Quran in chapter 17, verse 70 declares, "Indeed, we have honored every human being," and states in Quran chapter 95, verse 4, that every human being has been shaped in the best of molds, thereby establishing the intrinsic dignity and equal worth of all human beings, regardless of ethnicity, race, gender, social status, and other markers of difference. The 5 fundamental objectives of the Sharia, or as they're known in Arabic, maqasid, the Sharia, guarantee protection of religion, life, intellect, lineage, and property for all human beings, regardless of their religious and ethnic backgrounds, again, or of any other marker of difference and identity. The historical document known as the Constitution of Medina, drafted by the Prophet Muhammad in the 7th century, and that was referenced earlier today, accepted non-Muslims as equal citizens of the polity established in the city-state of Medina. As long as all members of the community, the Ummah, observe the rules of peaceful conduct and cooperation among themselves and promise not to resort to disloyal and treacherous acts. Terms like diversity, equity, and inclusion may have become dirty words now on university campuses. I think that's true for most campuses today. The Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion that we had, and that did actually really good work on campus, was just recently dissolved without any explanation. It just disappeared overnight at my institution. Well, they've become dirty words now on university campuses and in the federal government. In contrast to the Quranic worldview, in which these are the very shibboleths that bind us together as moral, humane, and upright communities. In the famous 13th verse from chapter 49, the Quran reminds, "O humankind, we have created you from a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes that you might get to know one another. The noblest of you in God's sight is the one who is most righteous." Let us then get to know one another and form alliances to challenge the rhetoric of hatred and division that is so prevalent now. Let's attempt to live up to our fullest potential as human beings and protect each other's civil liberties and uphold the rule of law by establishing and nurturing democratic societies that can guarantee justice and security to all without exception. In closing, let me take this opportunity to thank once again the Muslim Public Affairs Council and its president, Salam al-Marayati, and the Prince al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim Christian Understanding at Georgetown University and its director, Dr. Nader Hashmi, for graciously and generously co-sponsoring this conference. I think the themes that we dealt with today will have lasting significance for the foreseeable future. And your input and your contribution to that discussion was just as valuable. So thank you all for your presence today and taking part in this important conversation. There's a reception following, so I hope that we will continue this discussion that we've just barely started. So thank you again. We don't have questions.
This is a miracle. We ended at exactly 5 o'clock. I mean, if it's 5 o'clock, I don't think we have any more questions. We do have a reception, and I think one of the main goals of a conferences like this is to meet people, to network, to talk with people. I mean, we could all have stayed at home and just read books and papers, but I think conferences do serve an important purpose in that we get to know each other and hopefully work together on, different projects and different initiatives. So if you can stay, please do stay. We have a reception. We have more food for you today. If you can stay between 5 and 6, I think it will be worth it. In conclusion, I'd also would like to thank Nader Hashmi and the Center for Muslim Christian Understanding at Georgetown University, and MPAC and the MPAC team, Salam Al-Marayati, Harris Taran, and the whole team over there. We could not have done this without your help and without your support. Thank you very much for your help and for your support. I would like to thank the speakers who came from, some of them very far away to attend and to speak and to participate at this conference. In particular, I want to mention Irma, who came from Georgia, not the state of Georgia, but the country of Georgia, to speak at the conference today. So thank you very much. I think it's been an excellent conference and an excellent opportunity to discuss and learn about what's going on in the world and how we can react and how we can change things around us. I'd like to thank all the volunteers also who helped us, with registration and various aspects of the logistics. And Mariam Masmoudi, my daughter, who came from New York, she used to volunteer for CSID. Mariam is a little bit older than CSID, but she has worked with CSID since she was probably 6 or 7. I don't remember, but yeah, Asma remembers. So thank you, Mariam, for coming from New York to help with the conference and with the logistics. Thank you all. It's really a pleasure to see you again, and for some of you to see you for the first time. And I hope we can stay in touch. Stay hopeful. Believe that things can change. Do your part. That's all that God asks us to do. Do your part. The rest, we can't control what goes around us. What we can control is what can we do about it? What can we do to fix it? What can we do to make the world better? That